David Reed had never liked eating inside the cramped mess hall, so he took his dinner outside whenever his shift allowed it. Tonight was one of those rare, peaceful moments on Ashfall 7, where the sky turned purple during sunset, and 3 moons hung low on the horizon. He sat on a metal crate near the mining station, spooning lukewarm stew into his mouth while watching lava rivers glow in the distance. The planet was beautiful in a dangerous way. Everything here could kill you if you weren't careful. The air needed filters. The ground could crack open without warning. Strange creatures lived in the rock formations. Though most stayed away from the human settlement, David had been working here for 6 months, fixing broken equipment and keeping the mining operation running. It paid well enough to send money back to Earth, where his daughter lived with her mother. He missed her every single day. A scraping sound came from the rocks behind him. David turned his head slowly, one hand moving toward the radio on his belt. Working on Ashfall 7 taught everyone to be cautious, but what emerged from the shadows made him freeze, not from fear, but from pure surprise. 3 small creatures stepped into the light. They looked like miniature dragons from old Earth stories. Each one was roughly the size of a large cat, covered in scales that caught the moonlight. One had copper-colored scales, another gold, and the third shimmered with bronze tones. They had wings folded against their sides, long tails that swished nervously, and eyes that seemed far too intelligent for their size. Thin streams of smoke curled from their nostrils as they breathed. David sat perfectly still. His training said not to make sudden moves around unknown animals. The 3 creatures crept closer, sniffing the air, their eyes locked onto his bowl of stew. Then something impossible happened. The golden one opened its mouth and words came out. The voice was small and high-pitched, translated through the universal implant all colonists received. "We can eat your leftovers?" David blinked several times. He looked at the bowl, then back at the creatures. They stared at him with hopeful expressions, like puppies begging for scraps. The bronze one shuffled its feet. The copper one's stomach made a small growling sound. "You can talk," David said stupidly. "Yes, talk," the golden one replied. "Very hungry. Smell food. Please share?" David had no idea what these creatures were or where they came from. Every part of his training told him to call for backup, to report this to the colony administrator immediately. But they looked so young and hungry. He thought about his daughter and how she always wanted to feed stray animals back home. "Okay," he said slowly, setting the bowl on the ground. "Go ahead." The 3 creatures rushed forward, making happy chirping sounds. They buried their faces in the stew, eating with enthusiasm that made David smile despite his confusion. He had more food inside if he got hungry later. Watching them eat somehow made him feel less lonely. "What are you?" he asked. The copper one looked up, stew dripping from its snout. "We are Draconeer." "We are young, learning, Draconeer," David repeated. He had never heard of that species. The galaxy was full of alien races, but these weren't in any database he knew. "Where are your parents?" The 3 exchanged glances. The bronze one spoke this time. "Mother hunts. She returned soon. We wait. Does your mother know you're here asking humans for food?" They looked at each other again, and David got the distinct impression they were doing something they weren't supposed to. The golden one huffed out a small puff of smoke. "Mother says stay in caves. But we smell interesting food. Want to try?" David laughed. Apparently, children were the same across all species, curious and willing to break rules. He leaned back against the crate, watching them finish the stew. They licked the bowl clean, then sat back on their haunches, looking content. "Thank you," the copper one said. "You are kind. What's your name?" The bronze one asked. David Reed, what are your names?" They looked confused. The golden one tilted its head. "We have names in Mother's language. You cannot say them. Your mouth wrong shape. Can I give you easier names, just so I can tell you apart?" They seemed to consider this, communicating with small chirps and clicking sounds. Finally, the copper one nodded. "Yes, okay," David pointed at each one. "You're copper. You're gold. You're bronze, based on your scales." They appeared pleased with this arrangement, puffing their chests out proudly. David found himself relaxing. Despite their strange appearance, they acted like friendly kids. He asked them questions about their lives, and they answered in simple terms. They were learning to fly. They practiced breathing fire in controlled bursts. Their mother was very old and very wise. Time passed quickly. David didn't notice how late it had gotten until the ground suddenly trembled beneath him. It wasn't the usual seismic activity that came from volcanic shifts. This felt different, deeper, like something enormous moving underground. The three young Draconeer went rigid. Their eyes widened, and the smoke from their nostrils stopped completely. They looked at something behind David, their expressions shifting from relaxed to terrified in an instant. "Oh no," Gold whispered. "Mother comes." "You should run," Bronze added quickly. "Run very fast," Copper agreed. David turned around and immediately understood why every instinct in their small bodies screamed danger. Something massive descended from the purple sky, blocking out the moons. Wings spread wider than any ship he had ever seen. Scales reflected starlight like molten metal. Eyes burned with an intelligence that made David's blood run cold. This creature was not just large, it was ancient, powerful, and currently staring directly at him. The dragon landed 20 meters away with a ground-shaking impact. She was easily the size of a frigate-class spacecraft, with horns that curved back from her head and claws that carved grooves in solid rock. Heat radiated from her body in visible waves. David stood frozen, his empty bowl still in his hand. His legs refused to move. His brain screamed at him to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The three young Draconeer had scattered into the rocks, leaving him alone with their mother. The massive dragon lowered her head, bringing one enormous eye level with David. He could see himself reflected in it, small and insignificant. Then a voice filled his mind, not heard through ears but felt in his thoughts. It was deep, ancient, and carried the weight of millennia. "You fed my children." It was not a question. It was a statement that could be either an accusation or an observation. David couldn't tell which, and his life might depend on the difference. David's mouth had gone completely dry. He tried to swallow but couldn't. The dragon's eye remained fixed on him, unblinking, studying every detail of his face. He could feel heat radiating from her scales, making sweat run down his back. Every survival instinct told him to bolt for the safety of the mining station, but he remembered something from his basic training years ago. His instructor had shown videos of earth animals, bears, lions, tigers. The message was always the same. Running from a predator triggered their chase instinct. You stood still, made yourself look bigger if possible, and never showed your back. So David stood there, trembling but rooted in place. His hands shook, making the empty bowl rattle. He forced himself to maintain eye contact with the enormous creature, even though every cell in his body wanted to look away. The dragon's head tilted slightly, and David heard that voice in his mind again. "You do not run." He managed to force words out through his tight throat. "Would running help?" A sound rumbled through the dragon's chest that might have been amusement. "No, I would catch you before you took 5 steps. Yet most creatures run anyway." "Then running seems pointless," David replied, surprised his voice came out steady. The dragon shifted her massive body, circling him slowly. Her tail dragged across the ground, leaving a trench in the hard-packed dirt. David turned his head to keep her in sight, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to flee. "You fed my children," she repeated. "Why?" David thought carefully before answering. This felt like a test, though he couldn't figure out what the right answer might be. "They were hungry." They asked politely. "I had food to share." "They disobeyed my instructions by approaching your settlement." "They're kids," David said. "Kids get curious. They break rules sometimes. I have a daughter back on Earth. She used to sneak cookies before dinner even when I told her not to." The dragon stopped moving, studying him with both eyes now. David could see his reflection doubled in them, small and vulnerable. "You compare my offspring to your human child?" There was something dangerous in that question. David chose his words carefully. "I'm saying children are children. They want to explore. They want to try new things. That's how they learn, isn't it?" Silence stretched between them. David heard his heartbeat pounding in his ears. In the distance, warning lights blinked on the mining station. Someone had probably noticed the massive creature and was calling for emergency protocols. He hoped they had the sense not to do anything aggressive. The dragon moved closer, lowering her head until her snout was only a few feet from David's face. He could smell something like burning metal and old stone. Her breath washed over him in hot waves. "I am Ashara," she said. "My kind ruled this region of space before your species learned to make fire. We built civilizations that turned stars into gardens. We traveled between galaxies as easily as you walk between rooms. David's legs felt weak, but he locked his knees and stayed upright. What happened? We grew tired, Ashara said simply. We slept. Millennia passed like moments in our dreams. When we wake, everything has changed. New species spread across worlds that were once ours. Your kind builds settlements on planets we designated as nurseries for our young. Understanding dawned on David. This planet, HFY 7, this is one of your nursery worlds. Yes. I placed my eggs here 5,000 of your years ago, then went to sleep in the deep places beneath the volcanic flows. The geothermal energy sustains us during hibernation. 3 months ago I woke. My children hatched shortly after. This world should have been empty waiting for us. Instead, I find humans digging into the mountains, taking the metals that fuel our biology, filling the air with your machines. David felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. This was worse than encountering a dangerous predator. This was a territorial dispute with a species that could probably destroy the entire colony without much effort. We didn't know. The surveys showed no intelligent life, no signs of civilization. Because we were sleeping, Ashara replied. Her voice carried frustration. And now I face a choice. Do I drive your kind away from my nursery world? Do I destroy your settlement to protect my offspring? Or do I accept that the galaxy has moved on without my people? David's mind raced. He needed to find some middle ground, some way to prevent violence. Can I ask you something? You may ask. Why did you come here after your children visited me? You could have just called them back to wherever you were. Ashara's eyes narrowed slightly. They returned smelling of human food and speaking of kindness. I needed to see what manner of creature would share resources with unknown young. Most species my children have encountered either attacked them or fled in terror. You did neither. You fed them. You spoke to them. You treated them like people, not animals. Because they are people, David said. They think, they talk. They have personalities. That makes them people in my book. Your book is wiser than most, Ashara said. She pulled back slightly, giving David room to breathe without quite so much heat overwhelming him. I have a proposal for your kind. David waited, not trusting himself to speak. My children are at a critical stage in their development. They need to learn about the modern galaxy. They need to understand the species that now fill the spaces my kind once occupied. They need teachers who will show them more than just survival and hunting. Ashara's gaze intensified. I have a mission. Other members of my kind sleep across this galaxy and beyond. I must wake them, must gather our scattered people before something finds us in our vulnerable state. Something? David asked. A threat from the dark spaces between galaxies. It nearly destroyed us once long ago. I feel it stirring again. I must prepare my people. She lowered her head to eye level with David again. But I cannot take my hatchlings with me on this journey. They are too young, too vulnerable, and I will not leave them unguarded. David began to understand where this was going. You want us to watch them? More than watch, teach, protect. Help them grow into adults who understand this new age. Ashara's mental voice softened slightly. In exchange, I offer my protection to your colony. I offer knowledge from ages past. I offer alliance with the Draconeer for as long as my children remain in your care. That's not my decision to make, David protested. I'm just an engineer. The colony has an administrator. Earth has governments. There are whole departments that handle first contact situations. Yet you are the one who fed my children, Ashara said. You are the one who stood your ground when confronted by a creature that could end you with a thought. You are the one they will remember and trust. Your voice will carry weight in this decision. David ran a hand through his hair, trying to think clearly despite the adrenaline flooding his system. How long would you be gone? Years by your measure. Perhaps a decade or more. The galaxy is vast and many of my kind sleep in distant places. And if we say no, Ashara was quiet for a long moment, then you must leave this world. I will not risk my offspring to species that reject them. But know this, David Reed. I have watched humanity spread across the stars these past months since I woke. I have seen how you treat other species. I have seen both your cruelty and your kindness. You are young and reckless, but you have potential. My children could learn much from you, and perhaps you could learn from them as well. David thought about his daughter, about how he worked this dangerous job to give her a better future. He thought about the 3 young Draconeer eating his stew with such enthusiasm and trust. He thought about humanity's place in a galaxy that held creatures like Ashara, beings of such age and power that humans were barely worth noticing. "I need to talk to Administrator Wong," he said finally. "And she'll need to contact Earth? This is too big for any one person to decide." "You have 3 days," Ashara said. "I will return for your answer. If you choose wisely, your species takes its first step toward something greater than mining colonies and territorial expansion. If you choose poorly, we part ways and you leave this world to my children." The dragon spread her wings and David staggered back from the downdraft. She launched herself into the sky with a power that made the ground shake. Within seconds, she was gone, disappearing into the purple darkness above the 3 moons. David stood alone outside the mining station, still holding his empty bowl, trying to process what had just happened. Behind him, he heard rapid footsteps and shouting voices. The security team was coming, probably armed and certainly confused. He turned to face them, knowing that his quiet night of eating dinner outside had just changed everything. Administrator Patricia Wong had not slept in 36 hours. She sat in her office staring at the communication screen where officials from Earth argued in split windows, each one demanding something different. David stood in the corner, nursing his 4th cup of terrible coffee, watching the chaos unfold. Security Chief Robert Hayes had wanted to declare a military emergency immediately after Ashara's departure. He spent the first 12 hours insisting they evacuate the colony and call in armed support. It took Patricia threatening to remove him from his position before he finally calmed down enough to think strategically instead of tactically. The recording David had made with his wrist device changed everything. Seeing Ashara on screen, hearing her speak through David's translation of the telepathic communication, made the situation real for people back on Earth. This wasn't just another dangerous animal or territorial dispute with a known alien species. This was something unprecedented. Dr. Lauren Shaw from the Xenobiology Department had played the video 47 times, according to her own count. She kept pausing on frames showing Ashara's scales, her eyes, the way heat shimmered around her body. "This is the greatest discovery in human history," she kept saying to anyone who would listen. "A species that predates all known galactic civilizations. The knowledge they possess could advance human understanding by centuries." The politicians saw different opportunities. Senator Graham wanted to know if dragon scales could be weaponized. Representative Hughes worried about the cost of supporting alien children for a decade. Ambassador Morrison argued that refusing might make humanity look weak to other galactic species, who would learn of this encounter eventually. Patricia rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. She muted the Earth feed and turned to David. "What do you think? You're the one who actually met her. You looked her in the eyes. Is she trustworthy?" David set down his coffee cup. He had been asking himself the same question for the past day and a half. "I think she's telling the truth. I don't think she needs to lie to us. She's powerful enough to just take what she wants. Then why offer a deal at all?" Robert asked from his position near the door. "Why not just declare the planet off limits and force us out?" "Because her kids liked me," David said simply. "Because she saw me feed them and treat them kindly, and that meant something to her. She's not just thinking about territory or resources. She's thinking about what kind of species she wants raising her children while she's gone." Patricia nodded slowly. "That actually makes sense. It's what I would do if I had to leave my son with strangers. I'd choose people who showed kindness over people who showed strength." The door chimed and David's heart jumped. He knew that sound. He turned toward the entrance as 3 small forms squeezed through the automatic doorway before it fully opened. Copper, gold, and bronze tumbled into the office, their claws clicking on the metal floor. "David!" Gold chirped happily. "We smell you. We find you." Robert's hand went to his sidearm, but Patricia stopped him with a gesture. David crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the young Draconeer. They crowded around him, making happy sounds and leaving small scorch marks on the floor where their excitement made them breathe tiny flames. "Hey guys," David said, checking them over. "You okay?" "Where's your mom?" "Mother in deep caves," Bronze explained. "Says we can visit while humans think." Copper bumped against David's leg affectionately. "Mother says you good human. Says you not afraid. We like you." Patricia came around her desk slowly, studying the 3 creatures with fascination. "May I?" she asked David. "Ask them, not me," David replied. "They understand everything." Patricia crouched down like David had. Hello, I'm Patricia. I'm in charge of the human settlement here. The three young Draconeer regarded her carefully. Gold stepped forward, sniffing at Patricia's outstretched hand. You are pack leader? Something like that, Patricia said with a small smile. Are you deciding if we can stay? Bronze asked bluntly. The question hung in the air. Patricia glanced at David, then back at the three expectant faces staring at her. It's complicated. We have to talk to many people. It's a big decision. Mother says humans always make things complicated, Copper observed. Says you think too much about small things, not enough about important things. What do you think is important? Patricia asked. Gold sat back on his haunches, smoke curling from his nostrils as he thought. Being kind, learning new things, protecting family. Mother says these are important. Everything else is just noise. David saw Patricia's expression soften. She was a mother herself, with a son in college back on Earth. She understood what Ashara was offering and asking. Robert spoke up from the door. With respect, Administrator, they're young. They don't understand the political implications or the resource allocation required for... They understand what matters, Patricia interrupted, maybe better than we do. She stood up, her decision clearly forming. David, I want you to take them to the recreation area. Let the off-shift workers meet them. I want to see how our people react to them naturally, without military protocols or scientific observation. David nodded, understanding what she was really asking. She wanted to know if ordinary humans could coexist with the Draconeer, if relationships could form naturally rather than through forced diplomatic channels. He led the three young dragons through the colony's corridors. Workers stopped and stared, some backing away nervously, others approaching with curiosity. A botanist named Anne was the first to overcome her fear. She knelt down and started asking Gold questions about whether Draconeer could smell different minerals in the rock formations. Gold answered enthusiastically, demonstrating by heating a small stone, until it glowed red and explaining how different elements felt different temperatures. To his senses, an engineer named Timothy pulled out a tablet and showed Bronze some technical schematics, asking if the dragon's ability to sense heat differentials could help locate coolant leaks in the mining equipment. Bronze studied the diagrams with unexpected intensity, pointing out 3 spots where thermal signatures seemed wrong. Copper ended up with a group of kitchen staff who discovered the young dragon had a sophisticated palate and could identify ingredients by smell alone. They turned it into a game, letting Copper guess what was in sealed containers. The dragon got every single one right, and then started suggesting flavor combinations that the cooks found surprisingly good. David watched it all happen naturally. No fear beyond the initial surprise. No aggression from either side. Just curiosity and the tentative formation of connections. He recorded everything on his wrist device, knowing Patricia would want to see this. By the end of the shift, the 3 Draconeer had been integrated into a dozen different colony activities. They helped the maintenance crew by using their heat sense to locate equipment malfunctions. They entertained children in the family quarters by breathing tiny flame rings. They even participated in a trivia game in the rec room and beat the human team by answering questions about geology and chemistry that the database didn't even have. David found Patricia in her office hours later, still arguing with Earth officials. He showed her the recordings. She watched in silence, and he saw the moment she made her final decision. She unmuted the Earth feed. I've made my determination, she announced, cutting off a senator mid-sentence. We're accepting Ashara's proposal. The colony will serve as guardians and teachers for the 3 young Draconeer. The screens erupted in protests and questions. Patricia ignored them all. This isn't just about politics or science or resources. This is about whether humanity is capable of showing compassion to beings completely unlike ourselves. I just watched my people spend 4 hours bonding with 3 alien children, teaching them and learning from them, without any fear or hatred. That's who we are at our core, and that's who I want us to be in this galaxy. She turned to David. You're officially appointed as primary liaison to the Draconeer family. You'll coordinate their care, education, and integration into colony life. I'm requisitioning additional staff and resources to support this mission. Earth can argue about it all they want, but we're 12 light-years away, and this is my colony. The decision is made. David felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. But when copper, gold, and bronze crowded around his legs, chirping happily because they understood enough to know they could stay. It didn't feel heavy. It felt right. He just hoped Ashara would approve when she returned in 2 days to hear humanity's answer. They had chosen to trust her and her children. Now they would find out if that trust was returned. 4 months changed everything. David barely recognized the colony anymore, and he meant that in the best possible way. Copper, gold, and bronze had grown from cat-sized hatchlings into creatures the size of horses. Their scales had deepened in color, and their wings could now carry them on short flights around the settlement. More importantly, they had become part of the community in ways David never imagined possible. He walked through the expanded education center where Anne taught a class on local botany. Bronze sat in the back row, taking notes on a tablet specially modified for his claws. The dragon was actually better at identifying plant species than most of the human students because his enhanced senses could detect chemical compounds humans couldn't smell. In the engineering bay, Timothy worked alongside Copper on a new cooling system design. The young Draconeer could regulate heat flow through materials in ways that revolutionized their approach to thermal management. What would have taken weeks of testing with human methods, Copper could demonstrate in minutes by manipulating energy at the molecular level. Gold spent most of his time in the meditation gardens, with a group of colonists learning ancient Draconeer mental techniques. The young dragon taught breathing exercises that helped humans manage stress and improve focus. Several miners reported that Gold's meditation methods helped them stay calm during dangerous situations underground. David's official title was now Liaison Coordinator, but everyone just called him the Dragon Handler. He didn't handle anything, really. The 3 young Draconeer were independent and smart enough to manage their own schedules. He just made sure their needs were met and helped translate when communication got tricky. Today was special, though. Ambassador Richard Okafor had arrived from Earth last week, sent to officially oversee the human Draconeer partnership. He was a careful man, diplomatic and thoughtful, and he had spent days observing the colony before making any statements. This afternoon he had called a meeting to present his findings. David entered the conference room to find it already crowded. Patricia sat at the head of the table with Robert beside her. Scientists, engineers, and department heads filled the other seats. Copper, gold, and bronze lay on specially designed platforms near the window. Their tails curled around them as they waited attentively. Ambassador Okafor stood at the display screen, his dark suit somehow still pressed despite the colony's casual atmosphere. Thank you all for coming. I've completed my assessment of the situation here on HFY 7, and I'll be transmitting my report to Earth today. I wanted to share my conclusions with you first. He activated the screen, showing images of the colony taken over the past week. When I arrived, I expected to find a diplomatic arrangement held together by political necessity and mutual caution. Instead, I found something remarkable. I found genuine integration. Young Draconeer attending classes with human students. Humans and dragons working together on engineering projects. Shared meals. Shared games. Even shared jokes. Gold raised his head. David tells terrible jokes. We laugh anyway because we like him. The room chuckled and Okafor smiled. That's exactly what I mean. This isn't a diplomatic mission anymore. This is a community. He brought up charts showing productivity increases, reduced accident rates, and improved morale scores. Every metric has improved since the Draconeer joined you. But more than that, I've witnessed the development of genuine relationships. Bronze spoke up, his voice carrying the slightly deeper tone that came with growth. Humans are strange. They worry too much about small problems, but they are also kind. They share knowledge freely. They laugh at their own mistakes. Mother chose well when she trusted David. Speaking of your mother, Patricia said carefully, we've received reports from other colonies. More Draconeer have awakened across the sector. Not all the encounters have gone as smoothly as ours. Robert pulled up reports on the screen. 3 colonies have reported hostile encounters. The Draconeer there demanded immediate evacuation of human settlements. 2 colonies complied and left their worlds. 1 tried to negotiate and got destroyed. 17 ships, 3,000 people gone in less than an hour. The room fell silent. David felt his stomach clench. He looked at Copper, Gold, and Bronze, whose expressions had gone still and serious. Those were not our mother's kin, Gold said quietly. Not all Draconeer think alike. Some are angry about waking to find their worlds occupied. Some remember old wars from before the sleep. Some are just mean. Are we in danger? Someone asked from the back of the room. Copper shook his head. Mother chose you because you fed us when we were small. Because you showed kindness before you knew who we were. Her family will honor this bond. But other families may not care. Okafor nodded gravely. Which brings us to the real issue. The galactic community has noticed what's happening here. Other species are watching to see how humanity handles awakening Draconir. We've become a test case for what? David asked. For whether younger species can coexist with ancient powers, Okafor replied. And then there are the Scarrow. He brought up an image of avian-like aliens with cruel beaks and sharp talons. The Scarrow Empire has filed a claim with the Galactic Council. They argue that HFY 7 was designated as their resource territory 15 years ago, before we knew about the Draconir hibernation. They're demanding we leave or face consequences. Patricia leaned forward. Let me guess. They have military ships nearby. A battle fleet arrived in the outer system yesterday, Robert confirmed. 12 ships. They're not approaching yet, but they're definitely posturing. Bronze stood up on his platform, his scales rippling with agitation. This is Mother's world. They cannot claim it. They're not claiming it from your mother, Okafor explained. They're claiming it from us. Their argument is that humans have no right to be on Draconir nursery worlds, that we're squatters benefiting from someone else's territory. That's ridiculous, Anne protested. We have a formal arrangement with Ashara, which isn't recognized by the Galactic Council because Ashara isn't here to verify it, Okafor said. They could demand proof, demand negotiation, demand all sorts of diplomatic processes that would take months or years. David saw where this was going. And the Scarrow won't wait that long. No, they've sent an ultimatum. We have 48 hours to evacuate the colony, or they'll forcibly remove us. They're careful to phrase it as reclaiming their own territory, not attacking a Draconir world. They know better than to directly challenge Ashara, but they think humans are easy targets. Gold's eyes began to glow slightly, heat shimmering around his body. We will not let them harm our friends. We have grown stronger. We can fight. No, David said firmly. That's exactly what they want. If you fight and destroy their fleet, then humanity gets blamed for weaponizing dragons. The Galactic Council would condemn us. Other species would see us as dangerous. Everything we've built here would be destroyed. Then what do we do? Copper asked, his tail lashing in frustration. Let them take our home? David looked at Patricia, at Okafor, at the 3 young Draconir who trusted humanity to protect them. An idea formed in his mind, risky and possibly stupid, but it might be their only option. There's an old Draconir tradition, he said slowly. Bronze told me about it weeks ago when we were studying their history. It's called the Crucible of Worth. Bronze's eyes widened. David, no. That is for dire situations only. This seems pretty dire, David replied. He turned to the room. It's an ancient challenge system. Anyone can claim rights to Draconir territory, if they can prove they can survive on it. It was designed to test whether species were strong enough to share worlds with dragons. You want to challenge the Scarrow to a survival contest? Robert asked incredulously. They're warriors. Fighting is their entire culture. The Crucible isn't about fighting, Bronze corrected. It is about adaptation. About proving your species deserves to exist on the world. About showing you understand and respect the land. Gold stood up, understanding dawning in his eyes. And we can witness it. We can make it official. Mother gave us authority to judge in her absence. Patricia looked at David. You're serious about this? You want to bet our entire colony on a survival challenge against warrior aliens? David thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the 3 dragons who had become his friends, about all the people in this colony who had built relationships with creatures from another age. He thought about what humanity needed to prove to the galaxy and to themselves. Yes, he said, I think this is exactly what we need to do. Show the Scarrow and everyone watching that humans don't win by being the strongest or the most aggressive. We win by being adaptable, creative, and too stubborn to give up. Okafor studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll send the challenge to the Scarrow commander. But David, if you do this, you'll need to actually compete. You'll need to go into the most dangerous parts of this planet with minimal equipment and survive against trained warriors. I know, David said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But we don't have to do it alone. I'll need volunteers, Patricia stood up. Put together a team, 4 people maximum according to the traditional rules. I want experienced colonists who know this planet. Make it happen, David. Show the galaxy what humans are made of. As the meeting broke up, David felt the weight of what he had just committed to. 48 hours until the Scarrow expected an answer. Then the real test would begin. The Hell's Teeth region got its name from the jagged volcanic formations that jutted up like fangs across the landscape. David stood at the edge of the drop-off point, checking his equipment one final time. Beside him, 3 other volunteers did the same. Timothy Brooks, the engineer who had befriended Copper, wore practical climbing gear and carried a pack full of improvised tools. Ann Miller, the botanist who Gold studied with, had her suit pockets stuffed with sample containers and field guides. Robert Hayes, the security chief who had objected to the Draconeer at first but now treated Bronze like a nephew, carried minimal weapons but extensive survival gear. Above them, a Scarrow transport craft hovered, its dark hull reflecting the orange glow of lava flows. 3 Scarrow warriors stood at its open ramp, their feathered bodies wrapped in armor plating. Their leader, Commander Hakris, spread his wings in an aggressive display before folding them back against his body. His beak clacked together in what might have been laughter. Humans think they can survive where Scarrow thrive, Hakris called down. This will be brief. David didn't respond. Trash talk wasn't going to help them survive the next 48 hours. Bronze had explained the rules carefully. Both teams would be dropped into Hell's Teeth with basic supplies. No communication with outside support. No rescue until the time limit expired. Whoever survived with the most team members intact won the right to claim Ashfall 7. Copper, Gold and Bronze stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, their larger forms silhouetted against the purple sky. They would observe and judge but could not interfere unless both teams were at risk of complete extinction. Those were the ancient rules, and even the young Draconeer had to follow them. A horn sounded. Both transports opened their cargo bays simultaneously. David and his team jumped first, landing in soft volcanic ash that immediately began filling their boots. The Scarrow dropped from their craft with practiced precision, their taloned feet gripping the unstable ground naturally. The transports lifted away, leaving both teams alone in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. David's wrist display showed the temperature at 48 degrees Celsius in the shade. Toxic gas vents dotted the landscape, releasing sulfur compounds that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. Acidic rain was predicted within 6 hours, and the ground itself could crack open without warning as magma chambers shifted below. "Okay," David said, pulling out the map Bronze had helped him create. "We head for the lava tubes to the east. They'll give us shelter and access to geothermal vents we can use for water purification." "The Scarrow are moving north," Robert observed, watching the other team through his scope, "heading for the high ground." "Let them," Ann said. "High ground means more exposure to weather. We need to think long-term." They moved quickly but carefully, testing each step on the unstable ground. Timothy rigged a simple rope system that kept them connected, so if one person fell into a hidden vent, the others could pull them back. It was basic safety procedure that the Scarrow apparently didn't bother with. David watched the warrior team split up, each moving independently across the terrain. 3 hours into the challenge, they found the lava tubes. The entrance was partly collapsed, but Timothy used a combination of tools and leverage to widen it enough for them to slip through. Inside, the temperature dropped to a more manageable 35 degrees. The tubes stretched deep into the volcanic formation, lit by cracks in the ceiling that let in filtered light. Anne immediately started checking the walls, running her gloved hands over the rough surface. "The mineral deposits here can be processed for nutrients. Not tasty, but they'll keep us alive if we run out of rations." Robert set up a perimeter warning system using equipment sensors and some loose rocks. Anyone or anything entering their shelter would trigger an alarm. David focused on the water situation, finding a thermal vent that they could use to boil contaminated water from an underground stream. Night fell quickly on Ashfall 7. The temperature dropped by 20 degrees and the predicted acidic rain began. David heard it hissing on the rocks outside their shelter. Inside the tubes, they were protected but trapped. He hoped the Scarrow had found adequate cover. "Do you think they're okay?" Anne asked, echoing his thoughts. "They're warriors," Robert said. "Probably have cold weather protocols we don't know about." But David noticed the security chief checking his scope regularly, watching the infrared signatures in the distance where the Scarrow team had made camp. Morning brought the first real test. A massive earthquake shook the region, strong enough to collapse part of their lava tube entrance. They dug themselves out, coughing on dust and ash. In the distance, David saw smoke rising from the northern ridge where the Scarrow had camped. "Should we check on them?" Timothy asked. "We're competitors, not allies," Robert reminded them. "If they're in trouble, that's their problem." But David was already moving, following the smoke trail. His team argued but ultimately followed, knowing they wouldn't change his mind. They found the Scarrow camp in chaos. The earthquake had opened a fissure directly through their shelter. Two of the warriors were visible, trying to pull their third member from a collapsed section of rock. Commander Hakris saw David's team approach. His wings flared defensively, his beak opening to show sharp edges. "Stay back, humans. We need no assistance." "Your teammate is trapped," David said, already moving forward. "Timothy, bring the tools. And check for gas leaks. Robert, help me stabilize this section before it collapses further." "This is foolish," Hakris screeched. "You help your competitors. You weaken your own position." David ignored him, working with Robert to wedge support beams into the cracks. Timothy crawled into the dangerous space with his tools, cutting away rock that pinned the injured Scarrow warrior. Anne monitored her instruments, warning them when gas levels got too high. 20 minutes of dangerous work freed the trapped warrior, who had a badly broken wing but was otherwise alive. The Scarrow stared at the humans with expressions David couldn't read. "Why?" Hakris demanded. "Why risk yourselves for us? We are your enemies in this trial. If we are reduced to 2 members, you win by default." David wiped sweat and ash from his face. "Because that's what we do. That's what we're trying to teach the Draconeer. Civilization isn't about being the strongest or surviving at any cost. It's about protecting life even when it's inconvenient or dangerous." "Even enemy life?" the injured warrior asked, his voice strained with pain. "Especially enemy life," Anne said. "Because today's enemy might be tomorrow's friend if you give them the chance." Hakris looked at his warriors, then back at the humans. Something shifted in his expression. "The Scarrow teach that strength is everything, that the weak deserve to fall. But you pull us from death while competing against us. This is not weakness. This is something we do not understand." "Maybe that's what you need to learn," David replied. "Look, we have a secure shelter in the lava tubes. Your camp is destroyed. You can't survive out here with an injured team member and no protection. Come with us. The trial doesn't forbid it. You would share your shelter. Your resources?" Hakris seemed genuinely baffled. "Yes. And when the 48 hours are up, the Draconeer can judge whether humans or Scarrow better understand what it means to survive on a world like this." The 2 uninjured Scarrow warriors looked at their commander. Hakris stood silent for a long moment, his eyes studying David's face. Finally he nodded. "We accept your offer, human, but know that this changes nothing officially. We still claim this world." "We'll see," David said. "Come on. That acidic rain is starting again and we need to get your friend treated." They returned to the lava tubes as a combined group. Anne used their medical supplies to stabilize the injured Scarrow's wing. Timothy showed them how the thermal vents worked for water purification. Robert shared rations, making sure everyone had equal portions despite limited supplies. As night fell again, both teams sat around a small fire that Copper had helped them create before the trial began by heating special stones that burned slowly. The Scarrow watched the humans with cautious curiosity. "Tell me," Hakris said to David, "how does your species survive in the galaxy? You are not the strongest fighters. Your technology is adequate but not superior. Your empire is small compared to older civilizations. Yet you persist." David thought about it. "We adapt, we learn. We make friends instead of just allies. We share what we have. We try to see the best in others before we see the worst." "These are not traits that conquer worlds," Hakris observed. "Maybe not," Timothy agreed. "But they're traits that make worlds worth living on." The injured warrior, whose name was Tark, spoke up. "The humans saved my life today. By our laws, I owe them a debt. But more than that, they showed me something our warrior culture does not teach. They showed me that strength can include mercy." Hakris was quiet for a long time, staring into the glowing stones. Above them, through cracks in the lava tube ceiling, 3 dragon shapes circled in the night sky. Copper, gold, and bronze watched everything, and David knew they were learning from this trial just as much as anyone. The Scarrow commander finally spoke. "Perhaps there is more than one way to be strong. Perhaps the humans have something to teach us after all." David smiled, knowing that regardless of who won the trial, something more important had already been achieved. Understanding had begun, and that might be worth more than any territorial claim. The 48th hour arrived with unexpected calm. Both teams emerged from the lava tubes together, no longer competitors but something closer to companions who had survived shared hardship. The sky had cleared to its usual purple hue, and 3 moons hung low on the horizon. Copper, gold, and bronze landed nearby, their wings stirring up ash clouds as they touched down. Transport ships descended from orbit, bringing Patricia, Ambassador Okafor, and a crowd of colonists eager to see the outcome. A separate Scarrow vessel arrived carrying what David assumed were Hakris's superiors, dressed in elaborate ceremonial armor that marked them as high-ranking officials. But everyone stopped moving when the ground began to tremble. Not earthquake trembling. Something else. Something deliberate. From the deep volcanic flows beneath Hell's Teeth, Ashara emerged. She had been gone for 4 months, and in that time David had almost forgotten how massive she truly was. Her scales gleamed like molten copper in the morning light. Her eyes held the weight of millennia. And when she spread her wings, they blocked out the sun. The Scarrow officials immediately dropped into submissive postures, their wings folding flat against their bodies. Even their military discipline couldn't overcome the instinct to show respect to an apex predator. The humans stood frozen, and David realized this was the first time most of the colony had actually seen Ashara in person. The ancient dragon's gaze swept across the gathered crowd before settling on her 3 offspring. "My children, you have grown." Bronze, copper, and gold rushed to their mother, making happy chirping sounds despite their increased size. Ashara lowered her head, touching each one gently with her snout in a gesture that was unmistakably affectionate. Then her attention shifted to the 2 groups standing together near the lava tubes. "The crucible of worth has concluded," she said, her voice resonating in everyone's minds. "I have observed through my children's eyes. I have seen what transpired in Hell's Teeth. Now I will render judgment." Commander Hakris stepped forward, his posture stiff but respectful. "Great Ashara, the Scarrow completed the trial. We survived the full duration. We maintained our team integrity. By the ancient laws, Ashara interrupted. The crucible tests not mere survival but understanding. It tests whether a species comprehends what it means to exist on a Draconeer world, to share space with power beyond their own, to choose wisdom over brute strength." Her enormous eyes focused on Hakris. "Tell me, Commander, what did you learn in those 48 hours? Hakris hesitated. When he spoke, his voice carried less certainty than before. "I learned that the humans possess an unusual form of strength. They saved my warrior's life despite being competitors. They shared their shelter and resources. They demonstrated that survival can include cooperation rather than domination. And why do you believe they did this? At first I thought it was weakness or foolish sentiment," Hakris admitted. "But spending time with them, watching how they think and solve problems, I began to understand. They did it because that is how they believe civilized beings should act. They teach this value to your offspring. They show it through action, not just words." Ashara turned her gaze to David. "David Reed, you were given a choice to secure victory by allowing your competitors to fail. Why did you choose differently?" David felt the weight of every eye on him, human and alien alike, because winning at the cost of someone's life isn't winning. It's just survival without honor. If we want the Draconeer to grow up understanding that power should be used responsibly, then we need to show them what that looks like. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs us something. Gold stepped forward, speaking directly to his mother. "The humans taught us many things while you were gone. They taught us science and mathematics. They taught us about the modern galaxy and its species. But more importantly, they taught us through their actions that being strong means choosing to protect, rather than to destroy." Copper nodded enthusiastically. "They could have rejected us when you left. They could have abandoned this world to avoid complications. Instead, they welcomed us. They made us part of their community. When the Scarrow challenged them, they chose a path that avoided bloodshed." Bronze, always the most thoughtful, added, "Mother, you asked us to judge which species deserved to share this world with us. We choose the humans, not because they are the strongest warriors or possess the greatest technology, but because they understand what you wanted us to learn. They understand that civilization requires compassion." The 3 young Draconeer looked at each other, then spoke in unison. their voices harmonizing in a way that seemed ritualistic. We judge the humans worthy. Ashara nodded slowly, and David thought he detected approval in her ancient eyes. She turned to the gathered Scarrow officials. The Crucible's verdict is clear. HFY 7 and the surrounding systems belong to the Draconeer, and those we choose to share it with. Humanity has earned that privilege through both their initial kindness to my children and their wisdom during the trial. One of the Scarrow officials, his feathers marked with patterns indicating high rank, stepped forward. Great One, we respect your judgment. The Scarrow withdraw our territorial claim. However, he paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. Commander Hakris has submitted a request. A small contingent of our people wish to remain on this world, not as conquerors but as students, to learn from the human-Draconeer partnership, to understand these different forms of strength. Ashara regarded the official for a long moment. You asked to remain on a world where you challenged the inhabitants, where you came with threats of force? We asked to stay because we were wrong, Hakris interjected, his voice carrying genuine humility. Our culture values strength above all else, but we have seen that strength without wisdom is incomplete. If you permit it, I and a small group of my warriors would learn from both species. Perhaps we can bring that wisdom back to our own people. David saw Ashara's expression shift, something that might have been satisfaction crossing her massive features. This is unexpected, but it is also wise. My children will benefit from seeing how species can change their perspectives and grow. She looked at Patricia. Administrator Wong, do your people accept the Scarrow request? Patricia glanced at David, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She turned back to Ashara. We accept, but they come as equals, not as occupiers. They work alongside us, learn alongside us, and contribute to the community. Agreed, Hakris said immediately. We will earn our place here through action, not demand it through force. Ashara spread her wings, and everyone stepped back from the downdraft. Then it is settled. HFY 7 becomes a place of learning where humans, Scarrow, and Draconeer will build something new together. My children will remain here under human guardianship, but the Scarrow will add their perspective to the teaching. Ambassador Okafor stepped forward, diplomatic training taking over. Great Ashara, this unprecedented alliance should be recognized formally by the Galactic Council. The relationship between our species could set a template for how older and younger civilizations interact. Perhaps, Ashara replied. But first the relationship must prove itself beyond this single world. I have awakened 17 other members of my kind during my travels. Some are curious about humanity. Others are hostile, angry at finding their ancient domains occupied. What happens here will determine how they react to human colonies on other worlds. David felt the weight of that responsibility. They weren't just building a community on one planet. They were setting an example that could mean peace or war across entire star systems. There is something else you should know, Ashara continued. The threat I sensed, the darkness from beyond the galaxy that nearly destroyed my people long ago, it stirs again. I feel it in the void between stars, something ancient and hungry awakening. When it comes, my kind will need allies. We will need species who understand cooperation, who can adapt to threats beyond their experience. Her gaze settled on David. I chose to test humanity first because of one simple act. You fed my hungry children without knowing who they were or what they might become. That single moment of compassion revealed more about your species than 1,000 diplomatic meetings ever could. Gold walked over to David, bumping his massive head against David's side affectionately. You were first human we met. You shared food when we asked. Mother says first impressions matter most. You made good first impression. David reached up to scratch behind Gold's ear ridges, a gesture he had learned the young Draconeer enjoyed. You three made a pretty good impression too, despite almost giving me a heart attack when your mother showed up. The tension broke. Humans laughed. Even some Scarrow made clicking sounds that might have been their version of amusement. Ashara's rumbling purr vibrated through the ground. 6 months later, David stood in the expanded colony center watching 3 different species work together on a construction project. The new facility would house both educational programs and research labs, a place where the knowledge of ancient dragons, human innovation, and Scarrow martial discipline could combine into something none of them could achieve alone. Copper worked with Timothy and a Scarrow engineer named Skrin on advanced thermal dynamics. Gold led meditation classes that now included 24 humans and 5 Scarrow warriors, learning to manage stress and fear. Bronze studied with Anne and several Scarrow scouts on ecological adaptation strategies. Ambassador Okafor had successfully presented their arrangement to the Galactic Council. Other species watched with interest as the HFY 7 model proved successful. 3 more colonies had established similar partnerships with awakening Draconeer families, using the human Scarrow dragon template as a guide. Patricia found David during his lunch break, sitting outside and eating a simple meal, just like the first night he encountered the hatchlings. Earth wants to promote you, make you the official ambassador to the Draconeer across all human territories. David shook his head. I'm not a diplomat. I'm just an engineer who shared his dinner with some hungry kids. That's exactly why they want you, Patricia said with a smile. Because you didn't see a political opportunity or a military threat. You saw 3 young creatures who needed help and you helped them. Before David could respond, Copper landed nearby with Bronze and Gold following. They had grown even larger now, their wings powerful enough to carry them on long flights. But they still visited David daily, still considered him family in a way that transcended species. David not leave us, right? Copper asked, concern in his voice. Even if humans give him important title? I'm not going anywhere, David assured them. This is my home now. You 3 are my family. Bronze settled down beside him, smoke curling contentedly from his nostrils. Mother returns next week. She brings 2 more Draconeer families to meet humans. She says word spreads across our people about the colony where different species live as friends. Gold added, she also says the darkness draws closer, the thing from beyond galaxies. She felt it move during her travels. Not here yet, but coming. David looked up at the purple sky, thinking about threats he couldn't imagine, about ancient enemies of dragon kind that scared creatures powerful enough to destroy fleets. But then he looked at the colony around him, at humans and Scarrow and young dragons working together, learning from each other, building something new. When it comes, he said quietly, at least we won't face it alone. That evening, David received a message through the crystal scale Ashara had given him months ago. Her voice filled his mind, warm with approval. David Reed, you have done well. My children speak of you with affection and respect. The Scarrow tell stories of your compassion in their warrior halls. Other Draconeer hear of HFY 7 and grow curious rather than hostile toward humans. You have given our species a bridge to this new age. We learned as much from them as they learned from us, David replied through the crystal. That is why it works, Ashara said. You came to my children not as teacher, but as friend. You stood your ground when I challenged you, not from arrogance, but from courage born of kindness. When the darkness comes, when ancient threats return to this galaxy, it will be species like yours that give us hope. Not because you're the strongest, but because you remember that strength means nothing without compassion. The connection faded, leaving David alone with his thoughts. He looked at his dinner, remembered that first night when 3 small dragons asked if they could eat his leftovers and smiled. Everything that followed, all the changes and challenges and unexpected friendships, had started with one simple choice to share food with someone hungry. Maybe that was humanity's real strength, not weapons or technology or empire building, but the willingness to share what they had with those in need, even when it scared them, even when they didn't understand what they were sharing with. One small act of kindness that rippled outward into something larger than any individual could have imagined. In the distance, 3 young dragons practiced aerial formations, their scales catching the last light of sunset. They were stronger now, more confident, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and they would face those challenges knowing they had allies, friends, family across species lines. David finished his dinner, collected his plate, and headed back inside the colony. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new discoveries, new chances to prove that different species could build something better together than any of them could create alone. The darkness might be coming, but it would find a galaxy more united than it remembered, stronger for its diversity rather than divided by it. And it all started because one lonely engineer decided to share his dinner with 3 hungry children, never knowing they were dragons, never knowing their mother would test him, never knowing that one moment of simple kindness would change the fate of multiple species. Sometimes the smallest acts echo the loudest across the stars.